Okay, first thing, we do start with thinking about the scope of our data management strategy. This is important because this will help focus your thinking on the work you'll do during this analysis. And it'll help you figure out the critical areas to include when thinking about your data management plan. A good place to start is pain points or frustrations. Everybody has them. I'm sure that you've had a conversation in the last month about some difficulty with managing data. So you can just think back to those conversations over the last few months to come up with a starting point. When we kick off a data diagnostic with our clients to help orient ourselves and orient them to what's most important, these are some of the questions in these three areas that we ask about. The first one here is data collection. How efficiently and effectively is data managed in day-to-day operations? So if we think back to the knowledge pyramid, this is how do we translate reality into data? So an example of questions we ask are, do you think your workflows are efficient? How many of you have entered data in one system only to be told that you also had to take that same data and enter it in another system, and it doubles the time it should take to complete that task? Another one is checking data quality. Do you check data quality regularly? Or do you get to the end of the quarter and when you're under a deadline, figure out that the data is not clean enough for you to include in the report? Or you have to write a big caveat at the bottom of the report. So think about these questions. I won't embarrass anybody today asking for scores, but yeah, write down your score 1 to 10 here. The next area is data aggregation and analysis. This is about if you have ready access to your data for building reliable reports and providing information about your program. This is about, in the knowledge pyramid, this is about transforming data into information. Some examples of questions here are, can you compare summarized results year over year? Or does the data aggregation not work well or very consistently year over year? Another one is how transparent is the process to aggregate and analyze data? Or is it a black box and you don't really understand how it's all being pulled together because the system was written 10 years ago and nobody's around who understands it anymore? It's quite often a situation we see. So there's some other questions here you can think about to assign yourself a score. Next aspect here is data reporting and publishing. Can you leverage your data to build knowledge, and does it help you communicate your progress? This is about the transformation of information into knowledge. Questions to consider here are, do you trust the reports that you're looking at? Do you get funny questions from management, executives, stakeholders that are difficult to answer? And how well do your reporting and publishing solutions support business decisions? Are they at the right scope and scale? And do they support strategic planning in the right ways? This is really starting to get at how you turn this whole process into an asset for your organization. All right, with that, any questions about that? Well, okay.
Brian, one question that did come in is, like, let me kind of paraphrase it. As an organization, if you are experiencing some issues with, these different steps, what would be your starting point?
Good question. We'll get right into that momentarily.
Okay.
All right. The final step in thinking about the scope that you're going to focus on is thinking about which business activities you want to plan for here. This is, aside from just the aspects of data management, this actually starts to focus on the content of which activities we should explore. And this starts to inform you of which people you should go start to talk to. The trick here is if you set your scope too narrowly, improvements can be difficult to find. So if we just circled, say, one of these squares and said we were just going to focus on one of these things, we might not be able to find a lot of improvements. If you set the scope too broadly here, you'll soon feel like you're trying to boil the ocean and you have everybody in your organization to go talk to figure this out. So we recommend folks set their scope to include business activities that you know you can change, plus a few that you would like to be able to change. Be a little aspirational here, but don't go too far. For the systems that you do put out of scope, for example, here, this is work we did with our original data diagnostic effort with Oregon Metro's Natural Areas Program many years ago. And what we did here is help them draw out the scope to focus on initially on their acquisition process, how they report that, and how they track performance measures around that. What we decided not to do was go to figure out and talk to the finance group, who wants to talk to them, right, about how to better manage the data at this point, at this early phase. So we put them out of scope. Now, it's important here to understand how those two interrelate, or these what's in scope interrelates with related business activities outside of the scope. And you want to also define the information flow, but you don't want to actually focus too much effort on the edges here.